We're going to be looking at some trigonometric functions. So for trigonometric functions, we are focusing on a graph of sine, cos, and tan. So this is just a revision. So we have sine, cos, and tan. So one thing that you must remember is that for sine cos, this is the normal graphs. These are the normal graphs, but they can be written as sine and also cos and also tan, which are already been written for sine, cos, tan, and then the period that was used was 360 for sine and cos, and then for tan was 1/8. So yeah, if I can continue here, sometimes these graphs can be written flipped. They can put like a negative, so they can put like a negative sign at the beginning. So here I was just trying to show you that so there's a negative here, like they might put a negative, but they don't tell you like that. But how are they gonna tell you it's okay, there's a negative? So here, like they'll say like negative f at x. If they say negative f at x, that means the graph has been reflected above the x-axis. So here's the new graph, which is going to be negative sine x. And then you can see like the new graph that is written in blue, it has changed. The 90, remember at the normal graph it was positive 1, but now it has changed to negative 1. And then the one that was negative 1, it has changed to positive 1. The 270 has changed. But 180 and 360, they are still what? They are still 0, because now we can't reflect 0. 0 is still 0. So the same applied for cos. If you say negative f at x, so here's the negative f at x, it's gonna change to negative cos. You see, so it's gonna that's one is for this graph of time. So it's going to change to negative f at x, and then you're going to see the graph of cos changing the shape, and then it's going to be facing upwards like this. So you know it's okay, it has changed. Like if you see like the graph of cos, and then you see it facing upwards like this, just know that there's been a negative. It's a negative cos x. But if it's facing downwards like this on the up, the one on top there, therefore you know it's okay, that is the one that has positive cos x. And then the one that is for tan x, you can see the tan x, that's the graph, and then it's just going straight upwards. And you can see there's an arrow there that I put circles of purple. That means the graph is continuing upwards, so it has no restriction. There's no restriction of the graph. It's continuing upwards, it's continuing downwards, so there's no minimum, no maximum. So up to infinity, down to negative infinity. So and another thing that I want you to know, that I wrote it in green here, it's because sometimes you might find that not all graphs written f at x are the ones that are going to be positive. Sometimes those that are negative can be your normal graph. So for instance, it's like they might say f at x is equals to negative cos x. So that means you're going to find this graph, the one below, the blue one of cos, the blue graph of cos, you see, but it's facing upwards. So, and then they say negative f at x, you see, so it's negative f at x. Therefore, you know that, okay, remember that the original one of f at x is what's negative cos x. So the negative times the negative is going to change into positive cos x. So let's continue, guys. So we also have the period. The period is what? The length of one cycle. So it's like how many degrees did it took to complete like one wave or one cycle of the trig graph. So you can see there for sine, look at the graph of sine, it started from 0. Sorry about that, I just pressed down there wrong. So it started from 0. And then it ended up at 360. Therefore, you know it's okay. Therefore, that is gonna be 360 because you completed the 360. That is gonna be your period. The same for cos, completed 360. But for tan, it's completed at what? At 1/8. The tan graph is completed at 1/8. Why is it completed at 1/8? Because after 1/8, it's gonna repeat itself. How do you know it's repeating itself? Because if you look at here, after 1/8, it's gonna be written like this. So remember, we had the same thing that you wrote at the beginning, whereby we had 0. So if we are repeating, that means that the word repeat, that means that we have completed something. But now we're repeating something. After 1/8, we're repeating because we have completed the first cycle. So yeah, so that's the period of tan, it's 180. And the amplitude is what, how do you measure the amplitude? It's like half of the maximum value minus the minimum. So example of the graph of sine that I wrote. So it's going to be half, and then it's going to be 1, the maximum was 1, and then minus 1, the minimum was minus 1. So 1 plus, that's going to be 1 plus 1 is 2, half of 2, that is going to be 1. Therefore your amplitude is going to be 1. And your amplitude is always written as a positive number, because amplitude, those who, it's a distance, well, it's a distance from rest position to the maximum or minimum. Yeah, but yeah, it's like that. So it's a distance from maximum, from rest to maximum or minimum. Yeah. And when I say rest position, whenever I say like rest position, what do I mean when I say rest position? So here, rest position is more like the midway of the maximum and the minimum. So when I say the midway of the maximum and the minimum, let's just say, like for your graph of sine, and then your graph of sine is started from -1 to 1. I'm saying the y values. Whenever I talk about the amplitude, I'm using the y values. So the -1 and 1 I'm talking about is the y values. So it starts from -1 up to 1. The midway point of -1 and 1, which number is in the middle of -1 and 1? It's 0, right? So that is your rest position. But let's just say, let's use another point. Let's just say your minimum is 1 and your maximum is 3. Minimum is 1 and your maximum is 3. So which number is in between 1 and 3? Between the y values, it's 2, right? So between 1 and 3, it's gonna be 2. So that is your rest position. So if you start at 2 going to 3, the distance there from 2 to 3 is 1. Yeah, so yeah, so that's gonna be your amplitude from rest position to maximum or minimum. You can repeat, try to repeat, slow down, and to try to understand the amplitude. The restriction, the range is the restriction of the y values. So yeah, so when I say restriction of the y values, where it started, where it ended. So in terms of the y values, the sine and cos one on the one that I wrote above, it started at -1 up to +1. So it's y greater than -1 less than 1. Y greater than -1 less than ubani 1. Therefore you know that is gonna be your what? That is gonna be your range. It's written in terms of y values. And then for tan, remember I was talking about sine and cos, but tan, does tan have a range? Remember, what did I say? Range is a restriction of y values. Tan does not have a restriction. It's endless. It goes from -infinity to positive. I even circled with purple for tan the arrows. Can you see the arrows that are, what does the arrows mean? The arrows mean that it's continuing up and then it's continuing downwards. So that means whenever you will always have one answer for a range tan. The range of tan is always like one answer, no other answer. So it's the one that is saying y element of real numbers. That just means from -infinity to +infinity. That is going to be your range. Yeah, and moving on to period. Period, it's the length of one cycle, which we talked about. And then we also talked about amplitude. That's always a positive number. And yeah, so your graph also might be affected like this. So we are here now. This is where we are. So it might be affected by A, it might be affected by B, it might be affected by Q. So A affects the amplitude. So when I say amplitude, yeah, you might put like, because now at the beginning, remember here it was A was 1. So if you were to put 2, so that means your graph will turn at 2 and also -2 also. And then B affects the period. So B is that period. So how to calculate the period? Whenever you want to calculate the period, this is how you calculate the period here. Period is 360 over B. For example, if you were to calculate if I said B here was 2, so if we were to put 2 there before X, that means 360 divided by 2, that is 180. Therefore, that is your new period. So if you were to put half at b, if you were to put half at b, so you're gonna say 360 divided by b, therefore that is gonna be 720. So I hope you notice, if we are increasing b, if you increase b, your period is doing what? It's decreasing, it's going down, Baba. But if you decrease b, remember what did I say when I said b was half, and then I said 360 divided by half? 360 divided by half, go to your calculator and punch it out. You're gonna see it's gonna be 720. That means p is increasing. Remember, 360 divided by 2 is different from 360 divided by half. Yeah, well, 360 divided by 2, that is gonna be 180. 360 divided by half, that is gonna be 720. Go to your calculator and confirm. Gonna see. And then for tan, the period there corner, we calculated by 180 divided by b. So 180 divided by b, 180 divided by b, and then if your b was to change to be smaller, so if it's less than 1, your period will increase. But if your b is greater than 1, your period will also decrease. Yeah, that is for your period. Remember, please remember, for tan, the period is 180 divided by b. Do not use 360. If you use 360, goodbye to your dreams of being an engineer, doctor, accountant, or I don't know, tourist or anything like that. Remember, use 180 divided by b, 180 divided by b, 180 divided by b. Yeah. So let's look at horizontal shifts. For horizontal shifts, we are gonna be shifting x. We are not shifting anything else, we are shifting x. So because we're shifting x, I'm emphasizing that point. We are not shifting anything else, we are shifting x. Not x squared. We are not shifting x squared. We are not shifting 2x. We are not shifting 4x. We are shifting x alone. So you're going to find that your graph, your equations will be like this. A sine b and then brackets x plus p. The brackets is very important. The brackets will save your life. X plus p. So if you have p here, and then you know that's okay, I'm talking about what? I'm talking about a shift that is happening horizontally. When I say why it's happening horizontally, because you're shifting x. Remember, Pella, x on your Cartesian plane. Here's your Cartesian plane on the right side. I drew here. X is it's at a horizontal. So yeah, but so that is why we say it's shifting horizontally. So it's either you go left or you go right, not up and down, left or right. Yeah, but then you have to remember, if you put a plus, if you say x plus, that means you are going to the left. That means you are shifting to the left side, whereby the x are negative. So if you were to see your graph was shifted to the left side, you know that, oh, they said x plus something. But if your graph was so like x minus something, and in brackets, and then you know that, oh, that has been shifted to the right, therefore it's going towards the positive y-axis. Yeah. So okay, let's just look at this example. So like for example, so how was this graph shifted from sine x? So your original graph was sine x, but then they shifted it for a, and then they said x plus 30. There's a plus and there's an x alone. So that means the plus, it's going to the left. How many degrees to the left? So shifted 30 degrees to the left. Amen. And then here for B we have a problem, because now I taught you that Lana, we are shifting the graph, we're shifting x, not 2x, not 3x, we're shifting only x. So that means you must take out a common factor. So taking out a common factor, why are you taking out a common factor? So that you can be left with x only. So take out the common factor of 2. So 2, if you take out the common factor of 2, remember, the 2 is also taken out from 62. So you're going to be left from x minus 30. So you see, or if you're going to be looking at x, that means 30, and there's a minus la. So that means if shifting to the right, how many? So it's 30 degrees to the right. That's how we shifted the graph, 30 degrees to the right. We have the same problem at C, foods, because now you are 3x plus 60. We are not shifting 3x. No, we are not shifting 3x. We are shifting x only. So that means you must say take out the common factor of 3. So take out the common factor of 3. So if you take out the common factor of 3, the 3 will come out, and then the 60. Wait, 60 lapangani. So if you say 60 divided by 3, the answer that you're gonna get there is gonna be 60 divided by 3. You're gonna 60 divided by 3. You're gonna get 20. So that means there you have 20. So it's x plus 20. So that means lapana we have shifted the graph to 20 degrees to the left. Why I'm saying to the left? Because there's a plus. So it's 20 degrees to the left. So yeah. And can you see that at B, this 2 and this 3 will affect what? It will affect the period. We are going to be dividing the period by 3. Yeah, the same thing will apply for cos. Whatever I'm discussing for sine, it happens to cos. Some of it also happens to tan, but tan is a different case, as we analyzed at the beginning. So yep, let's continue. Now let's analyze how to draw graphs using a calculator. So if you are interested in that of how to use a calculator, you're gonna share that during the live sessions. So yeah, or you can ask on WhatsApp or anything like that. But that is how we're gonna share it. But now let's move on to, if we had a graph, let's just say okay, let's start at the beginning. Drawing graph is easy. Drawing a graph of tan over it's a bit easy, because now you can just use a calculator and then it's gonna give you the points that you need. Just give me a second to just write it down correct way. So let's just say at the beginning here, graph will say y is equal to sine x. I want you to say that at the beginning. So x element of -1, so it's starting at -180, so it's gonna go like this. So you can see it's okay, fine. This is just a normal one whereby the maximum is 1 and then the minimum is -1 sine x. The one that I drew at the beginning, but the difference with this one is that it started -180 to 180. And the period, you're gonna measure it. You're gonna calculate the period by saying 360 divided by b. The b here is 1 because now nothing is written here. That means it's 1. So still it's gonna be 360 a period. But let's move on. If we move on, let's just say the graph has been changed, but there's a little bit tweaks, and then now there is 2. Example, let's just say here there's like 2. So 2 affects the amplitude. So that means your graph will change. It will no longer be the turning point will be no longer, it's be 1 and -1. So that means hey, watch and learn. Look at this magic. Look at this magic that I'm gonna perform. This is gonna be your new graph. It's gonna be, can you see what's in the 90? It was turning at the 90 degrees had a maximum of 1, but now it has a maximum of 2, and the -90 has a maximum of -2. So that means now your new range will say 1 greater than or equals to -2, and then y less than or equals to 2. So this is gonna be your new range for this graph. Can you see that? This is gonna be your new range of this graph. The only thing that changed is gonna be the amplitude, but -180 is still 0, -90 has changed to be -2, and then 0 is still 0. +90 is now 2, and then 180 is still 0. But ake sithi-ke manje we are changing it. Hey, changes and changes. Let's just say we plus 1 again, man. If you're gonna plus a 1, how is the graph gonna change? Buga and learn. Book. So if you're gonna change the graph and say plus 1, bear in mind. Bear in mind. So if I say plus 1, or let me just do like this. Let me just describe it like this first. If I say plus 1, when I say plus 1, I'm shifting the graph upwards. So the plus means I'm shifting the graph upwards. If I was to put a negative, that means it would be downwards. So if I say plus 1, sorry about the noise. So if I say plus 1, so I'm shifting the graph up. So it's negative 180. Let's start at the beginning. And it was at 0, ne? But because it's going one unit upward, so that it's the y values are changing. We are shifting. When I say up and down, I mean for the y values. So it's gonna move from negative 180. It was at 0, ne? But it's gonna move to 1. And then the negative 90, it was at negative 2. So it's gonna change to ubani to negative 1. It's going up. We are going up. The 0 is gonna change to ubani, going up to positive 1. The 90 was at 2, but now it's going to change to 3. So let me just add that part. It's going to change to 3. So it's going to change to 3. So here's the 3 now. And then for the 180, it's going to change. It's going to move from 0 to ubani. So that means here's your new graph. This is the one that I've added the plus 1. So we have the graph has been shifted upwards. All your points have shifted upwards. The critical points, yeah, boy. So the way that you're gonna be able to shift is you're gonna be using the critical points that you already had. Yeah, boy. So you're just gonna say start at the beginning. The way that I started negative 1.8, but it will depend on the question paper, how they shifted it, how they placed your points. Oh, by the way, let me tell you how did I know that I'm gonna put 90, 180, yeah, so whenever like you want to be putting on my intervals, so for intervals, yeah, let's discuss the intervals. So for intervals, the intervals are the ones that, how do you know that you must put like a 45, 90, 135 and up to 180? How do you know that? You're gonna be using intervals. So how do you calculate intervals? So I is equals to period over 4. Yeah, period over 4. Remember, the period that I have here for the above graph was 360, because now, so that means you must first calculate the period using the way I told you. So 360 over b, or you can say 180 over ubani over ub for the tan one. Yeah, this one is cos and sine. So if you're gonna first get your answer for a period, then take that answer and put it for interval. So you're gonna put it here. So in this case, it was 360 the period. So if you say 360 divided by 4, that is 90. So that means you are moving into an interval of you are moving into an interval of what? Of 90. So 90 degrees langoba pela, it was 360 divided by 4. And then you got 290. So we're moving at 90, 180, 270. Yeah, but if the period was to change, what is going to change your interval? The thing that is going to change your interval is going to be what? If you were to put a b. So if you were to put like a different b, if the b was to change and like become 2 or something like that, it's gonna first affect your period. Once it affects your period, it's gonna affect your interval too. Oh yeah, sorry. It's gonna affect your interval too. Yeah, so if anything affects your period, it also affects your interval. Yeah, so let's move on. So I was just discussing that. So can you see now that I've shifted the graph upwards by +1? The amplitude hasn't changed, because now the amplitude is still 2. Yeah, but because now we have to look the midway, the midpoint of -1, because now the minimum is by -1 and then the maximum is by 3. So the midpoint of -1 to 3 is gonna be what? The number in between -1 and 3, that is gonna be I think it's gonna be if it's not 1, Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, it's gonna be 1, positive 1. The number in between lokunjan. The number in between, or is it 2? Let me just calculate it first. We would see, yeah, so I think it's gonna be 1. Number in between -1, 0, and 1. Yeah, 1. And then the amplitude is still gonna be 2, because if you have to say half of the maximum is 3 minus -1, because that is how you calculate the amplitude. So the answer is 2. So your rest position is 1, yeah, so this is your rest position. And if you have to calculate from here to here, the amplitude, it's gonna be like about 2, from 1 to -1. The distance from 1 up until -1, from 1 -1, that is 2. From 1 up until 3, so the amplitude is still 2, so it's gonna be 2 units. If they ever ask you the amplitude, the answer is always in 2 units. 2 units. Sorry, not 2 units. The answer will always be positive and units. Yeah, but yeah, it's gonna be positive and units. This is just a revision, yeah, but so yeah, Hlampe, you can just practice. When practices, let's just interpret this graph, yeah, but as a reminder. So yeah, when you interpret this graph, so they gave you the graph of the functions f at x equals to -2 sine x plus p, and then this is the interval that you're gonna not interval, but restriction of x that you're gonna be using. So starting from -8 up until 1/8. Okay, fine. G at x is equals to cos 3 over 2x. Okay, -8. Okay, then they told about the turning point. A is the turning point of f, and B is the turning point of G, and a point of intersection. B is a point of intersection. So that is, they say that write down the value of P. So the value of P, so you can see the value of P is a shift of it's a shift of sign. So how you're gonna determine the shift, would say how did it happen, and we can see there's a negative sign there. So yeah. So it was about f. Where is f? Here is the f. So in order for you to determine how was the shift, remember, whenever we start the graph, whenever we started the graph of sine, they always started at 0. They always started at 0 before they were shift. But if we were to shift them, they shifted them, and then the graph is now starting at a -8. So can you see that the graph did not go to the right, but it went to the left in terms of its shift icon. So if it's going to the left, therefore there was an addition, so there was plus, but it's plus bar. Which number did it start at? It started at negative, so it was shifted 30 degrees to the left. So that means it's x plus 30, but the p is 30 degrees. But if the graph started here and then it said 30 degrees, so it's gonna be x minus 30. Yeah, so x is plus 30, so it's x plus 30 degrees. So what is the minimum value of f at x? F at x is the one of sine, so the minimum value is gonna be what? It's gonna be -2. But please beware. How did I know it's -2? Because there was this amplitude. Please beware. There are other questions whereby they might say f at x, like they can say -2 sine and then x plus 30. Okay, let me just shift this. They might say f at x -2 sine x plus 30, and then they say plus 1. Beware. Yes, the amplitude is still 2, so you might think that the graph, the minimum is at -2, but remember, it was also shifted plus 1. So that means for this graph of f that we're looking at currently, it might have, if they was to ask the same question for b and say what is the minimum value of f at x, that means it's no longer going to be -2, because now it started by -2. Before there was a plus 1, before there was this plus 1, it was -2, but then it was shifted plus 1. That means the new minimum value is gonna be ubani -1. That's gonna be your new minimum value, because it was shifted, the graph was shifted 1 unit upwards by that +1. And also the maximum is also gonna change. It's no longer gonna be u2. It's no longer gonna be +2, but it's gonna be u3. Yeah, so yeah, beware of those kind of circumstances, because now we're going upwards. Yeah, but the +1 is very dangerous, but the +1 does not change the amplitude. The amplitude does remain the same. It's gonna change the minimum and the maximum. Yeah, so if they ask the period of G, you know, that's gonna be your homework. So period, because G, if you look at G, there's this B, there's that B, so you're gonna say period is equals to 360, because it's the cosine over 3/2 divided by 3/2. So you're gonna find your answer. I don't know, you can punch it in your calculator and then that is your answer. So what is the amplitude of F? The amplitude of F, simple, it's gonna be 2 units. It's a distance, positive number. They tricked you here, they want you to believe that you're gonna put -2. If you put -2, you are wrong. It's not -2. You are wrong, absolutely wrong. But the answer is 2 units. Yeah, because it's a distance, positive distance. And then they say write down the coordinates of A and B. Okay, for A and B, it's a turning point of F, so it's still gonna be the same. It's still gonna be -2. The coordinates, okay, the coordinates are gonna say, well, I was gonna discuss this in the next chapter, in terms of how you're gonna see the change in coordinates, all of that. But here, remember, in the original graph of F, let's go to the original. Remember, okay, this one was it was negative, there's a negative sign, so it might not be the same as the original one. But if you flip it, obviously gonna be at Subani. Usually the x that is gonna be maximum, it's usually 90, but then the graph was shifted 30 degrees to the left, so it's no longer gonna be 90. That is good. So if we say 90 minus 30, that is gonna be about 6. So the new maximum is gonna be a 6. So it's A is gonna be more of about 60 degrees is to about -2. Or before it was shifted, before there was a plus P, it was at 90. But then it went to the right, it went to the left, the graph went to the left. So it went to the left by 30 degrees. So from 90 and then going back by 30 degrees, it's 60. So 60 is to -2. And then B, for B, it's the turning point of G. So the turning point of G, it's still gonna be similar to the one that you wrote, Slapana. It's gonna be Uba. You can, okay, so we know that's Ilokunjan for cost, the graph of cost, originally vele it changed from, it was 180, so if it's 180, it's still gonna remain at no, it's no longer gonna be 180. So the way that you're gonna determine the coordinates of B, remember the maximum did not change, the minimum did not change. Here it's the minimum of U cos. The minimum did not change, so it's still gonna be what? It's still gonna be ubani -1. So we know that uy corner is -1, but we do not have ubani x. So you can just do it. Just say cos 3/2x, and then here put about -1, and then just solve for that, and then the answer that you're gonna get. So how you're gonna solve is so you're gonna say shift cos, and then 3/2x, and then you're just gonna divide the answer that you're gonna get here. You're gonna divide by 3/2x. Yeah, you're gonna divide by 3/2. Then you're gonna get your answer, x, and then the answer you're gonna put it there. So currently I can't punch my calculator because now it's gonna affect the video that I'm currently taking. So yeah, please excuse me on that. And then determine the range of h if h at x is equals to half of f at x minus 1. So can you see they shifted the graph 1 unit downwards. And then it's half, so the amplitude has been changed and it has been halved. Yeah, so remember at f the amplitude was -2, so half of -2 is gonna be what? It's gonna be -1. So yeah, it's gonna be -1. So G, write down the equation of M if M is obtained by shifting G. So this one the range. So they want the range now. So it's 1 unit down, and it's the new amplitude has been ubani -1. So that means la so I can't draw it. So the range here, we know that it's gonna be -1 now, but the minimum is gonna be -1. But then it's also went 1 unit down. So if it's going 1 unit down, so it's still gonna be -2. You see, so you see, would say, but figure like they decreased it. They halve the amplitude by -1 by half, and then half of -2, that is going to be -1. That's the amplitude, because there's a half here. They have f at x, so it's going to be -1. But then they said it's going 1 unit down, so it's still going to be -2. So yeah, it's going to be -2. And remember, at the maximum was if we have -2, that means it's going to be 1. Also, the maximum was also going to be 1. But if it's going to be 1 unit downwards, so we're taking the +1 and then you're going 1 unit down, so it's going to be at 0. So it's more like the range is going to be y greater than equals to -2, but greater than equals to 0, because now initially we change the amplitude from -2 and we have the amplitude by half. Okay, we have the amplitude, yeah. So if you're having the amplitude, here's the amplitude of f. It was -2. So if we have -2, it's gonna be -1. So -2 times half is gonna be -1. So we were happy with, that means the amplitude has been -1, and then the minimum is gonna be -1 and the maximum is gonna be 1. But another problem came through. There was a -1 here in the question. So that means if there's a -1, that means the graph of sine was shifted downwards by 1 unit. So we had a maximum of 1. So we're no longer going to be having a maximum of 1. It's going to be going down by 1 unit. It's going to go to 0. And we had a minimum of -1. So it's going to go down to a minimum of -2. So that means from minimum to maximum, -2 to 0. So that is going to be your range. Yeah, so yeah. And then I'm going to be discussing these questions. These are very important questions that always comes out in your question papers. So how you're going to determine this type of questions? I'm just going to talk about H only. When they say for which values of x is f at x equals to zx, when they say equal, that is whereby they're going to be intersecting each other, where they're going to be touching each other. So you're just going to go there at B. So you're going to find the point on B. The answer that you got there at B, that's going to be your answer. X is equals to that value where they are touching each other. When they say f at x is greater than g at x, you're going to be using your ruler. So your ruler, in order for you to determine f at x, so that means when they say f at x greater than g at x, that means the graph of f must be on top of G. So if you find a section whereby f is on top of G, so that means you have the correct. But if G is on top, therefore that is not the correct interval that you want. So how are we going to determine that? Watch and learn. So starting, you use a ruler. Always use a ruler. Start here. If it starts here, you can say, okay, at the beginning at -8, which graph is on top? Remember, we want the f on top, right? We want f on top, so here's on top. So we have G. This is the graph of G, the blue one. So as you can see, currently the graph of G is on top and then the f is below, so that's not something that you want. Then we continue, still G is on top, G is still on top, and then we go here to the intersection. After the intersection, the F is on top. So after F, we don't know the value, so whereby X is greater than, and then up until here it's 1/8, still F is on top. So that means your answer for the Roman figure number 2, it's gonna be X greater than that intersection that I do not know. So how you gonna write it? But you're gonna end at 1/8. You're not just gonna say X greater than the intersection. So let me just calculate that first. Let me just see, and I'm using my phone. So I'm just gonna say shift cos, and then so your answer there is gonna be 120. So it's 120 lapa, because now I can see that it's very important for us. So 120, so it's 120 lapa. So that means the answer here is gonna be X greater than 120 but less than 1/8, because now we are restricted to 1/8. You can't just write X greater than 120. You can't just say that, because now that these graphs have been restricted to 1/8. So X greater than 120 but less than 1/8. So this is gonna be your answer. So how do you determine? What is gonna help you to determine this kind of answers? You have to know your intersection. So you have to know your intersections. Where the graphs intersect. So where the graph intersects, that is gonna be it's gonna assist you on determining whether it's on top of or below. So your intersections are gonna help you, and also your asymptotes. This will work for the tan graphs. So the asymptotes also for the tan graphs. So your intersections are gonna help you. Did you see? When we did the ruler thing here? When you did the ruler thing, after the intersection, that is when the graph changed. F was on top, but before the intersection, everything was just normal, or G was on top. So the intersections are the ones that determine. This will help you answer this type of question. So you have to know your intersections. But for Roman figure number 3, the Roman figure number 3, they said f at x times g at x is less than or equals to 0. So that means f at x times g at x is less than or equals to 0. Now, what is going to assist you here? The one thing that is going to assist you, you're going to be assisted by the x-intercepts. They are the ones that are going to assist you, the x-intercepts and the asymptotes too for tan. Why am I saying that the x-intercepts are going to assist you? So you're going to check whereby the graph touching the x-axis. Because if you have f at x times g at x less than 0, so the only way for you to have a number that is going to be less than 0, and you have two numbers that are timesing each other, but still they give you a number less than 0, because which number is less than 0? What type of numbers that are less than 0? The type of number that are less than 0, that is going to be what? That is going to be a negative number. So in order for you to get negative, you must say -1, or sorry, why am I saying -1 specific? But you must say negative times what? A positive. So when I say negative and positive, what do they actually mean for the graphs of f? If I say negative for graph of f, that means the graph is below the x-axis. So it's below the x-axis. So it says the y values that are going to be negative. But if I say positive, that means it's above the x-axis. So it can work vice versa. It's either the f is going to be negative and the g is positive, or it can be the f is going to be positive. So the f is going to be positive and the g is going to be what? It's going to be negative. At the end, every time if you say negative times positive, it's going to be, the answer is going to be negative. Every time if you say some positive times negative, the answer will always be what? The answer will always be negative. So that is what they mean when they say f at x times g at x must be less than 0. So the other one must be negative, the other one must be positive. What is the negative and the positive that I'm talking about? It's the y values. Remember, you must remember this. F means y, the G also it means what? It means y. So it's the y values that are timesing each other. So if the y values from the other graph is negative and the y values from the other graph is positive and they times each other, that means you're gonna get a negative. So let's do that. Let's do this. So using your ruler again. The ruler is gonna help you. So here, if you start here, so either graph, so that means one graph must be above the x-axis, the other graph must be, so they must never ever be in the same axis. They must never ever be like both above or both below, you see. So they must both be separate. The other must be on the above x-axis, or the other must be below, in order for us to have this type of answers that they want. So starting here, so negative 30 and negative 30. Okay, how after negative 30 the other one is above and then the other one is below the x-axis? So you can see that for G, after negative 30, G is positive, and then x is the f graph, the one that is screen, is gonna be negative. So positive times negative is still gonna give you a negative. Therefore, when you multiply them, they're gonna give us okay, I'm going with my calculator, and then here's an okay, as you can see, here's something that is gonna assist you. You must do it like this, yeah. So here are your x-intercepts. So here are the other x-intercepts, and then here is the other x-intercept. So where the graph is touching like the x-axis, that is gonna be your x-intercepts. Here also. Okay, let's continue. So I'm moving from negative 30 to ubani. Here we got 60, right? So it was 60 here. So we got 60. We got 60 here. So from negative 30, so for this interval, we want this interval. This is how you're gonna answer these questions. So this interval is correct. So from negative 30 to 60, that is gonna be the first correct answer. But if you carry on moving, after 60 now, they are both below. When they are both below, they are both negative. Remember, if you say negative times negative, the answer is gonna be positive. So we do not want this section from negative 30 from after 60 to I do not know here. It's gonna be I think it's about 150, I think. Yeah, but from 60 up until to this interval, this yellow line, so I think that's gonna be 150 if I'm not mistaken. So if I say half, negative 2 sine, and then 150 plus 150. The date's 150. Yeah, but I'm still gonna explain how you're gonna get all of these values. 150. So from 60 to 150, we do not want that interval. So did you see? In order for you to be able to answer these questions, first you must get your what did I say? Your x-intercepts, and then put this type of lines that I showed you. Yeah, well, put this type of lines, and then you're gonna take which interval you want. So from negative 30 to 60 you want that, but from 60 to 150 you do not want it because they are both below. But after 150 to 180, after 150 and 180, you can see that the f graph is on top and then the other graph is below. So from 150 to 180 we want the interval. So 150 to 180, that means, so the intervals that we have, the answers for Roman figure number 2, this is how you're gonna write them. Whereby x is greater, or okay, let me use another color. Whereby x is gonna be greater than or equals to ubani negative 30, but below, but less than or equals to which did I take, or 60. So for 60, this is gonna be your first answer, and then your second answer is gonna be what? Or which one did I take? Or the one that is between 150 and 180. So your x is greater than or equals to 150, or less than or equals to what? Did they put the equal sign? Or they put that is why I'm putting the equal sign, because they did put the equal sign. So yeah, and then 150 and then less than 180. So these are your answers that are going to be correct. Yeah, so that's it. For more questions like this and for more explanation, and you're gonna do it during our live sessions. For more info, this is my email. This is my email. And then I'm gonna answer all questions. This is my email, and then you're gonna do more questions, or yeah. So for more questions like this, you're gonna do them. Just